All right, let's take a look at this vocabulary. We have lots of terms here. And again, some of this might be review for you, some of it might be completely new. So thanks for your patience as I go through this. We're going to start here at the top. ELL is an acronym that means English Language Learners. And ESL is an acronym that means English as a Second Language. Now, the difference between these is that ELL generally talks about the student. It's the learner, okay? It's the kids that are learning English. ESL, on the other hand, talks about the programming. What do we teach? We teach English as a second language. But please be aware that ESL is kind of, well, it can be a misnomer for students who know more than 2 languages. I've worked with students from over 40 different linguistic groups, and many kids that I worked with from India, for example, know 2 to 3, maybe 4 languages already. Same with some indigenous languages from South America. There's many areas in the world where students know several languages and then they're learning English. So a lot of people in the field don't care for the term English as a second language because it doesn't always describe every student. But at any rate, we use it all the time, ESL. I'm going to jump down here and talk about L1 and L2 real quick. L1 is your first language, your primary language. My L1 is English. L2 is your second language, or in other words, the target language. Again, knowing that some kids may be learning English as a third or fourth, we still use this term. And my second language is Spanish. Going back up here, bilingual, that's another form of instruction, but it's also a goal of many programs to encourage students to know 2 languages, or multilingual, know more than 2 languages. I myself and Grace were both bilingual because we know Spanish and we know English. Although for me, learning Spanish is going to be a lifelong process because I'm not proficient, completely proficient in it academically. We'll talk more about the academic vocabulary later. But what you need to know is that bilingual is the form of instruction that we use in our district. We have several schools that have been offering bilingual education for some time. White Rock has been offering bilingual programming for, I believe, 40 years. And Banting, and Blair have also been offering bilingual education. And now we have several dual programs coming into play. And let's talk about that next. Just jot that down. White Rock, Blair, and Banting. All right. So take a look here at dual. Dual is another term that we use to talk about bilingual, but it gets a little more specific because we have dual language one-way programs and we have dual language two-way programs. Okay, so dual language one-way is kind of what we're talking about here when we talk about the historical the programs that we've offered historically in Waukesha. We have native Spanish speakers. Their L1 is Spanish, and they're learning English. Okay, it's generally a homogeneous group of kids with the same linguistic background learning English together. Okay, they start out in Spanish in kindergarten, and slowly, all the way up to 5th grade, start weaving in and phasing in more and more English instruction. The goal of a dual language or bilingual program is for students to be bilingual, biliterate, and bicultural. A dual language two-way program is a little different, and that is what we're starting to offer. At Banting is phasing in a dual two-way, and then we have Higher coming in and is phasing in a dual two-way. Eventually, my understanding is that we're going to offer dual two-way at all the sites, and even consider what that might look like at the secondary level. What's different about dual two-way is that you start out with the native speakers and the non-native speakers, okay? And so what I mean by that is we have Spanish speakers and English speakers in the same classroom learning Spanish and then eventually English side by side. So we have students from English-speaking households and students from Spanish-speaking households both learning together. It's pretty amazing. If you haven't seen it, I recommend learning more about it. It's really what many researchers are calling one of the best modes of instruction for all students. We know that learning another language strengthens your brain, and it really prepares you for more opportunities in the world. LEP is a term that the federal government uses, and what it means is limited English proficient. People in the fields, like myself, don't love that term because it's kind of a deficit way of thinking about students, whereas ELL is a little more empowering because it talks about how they're learning it. They're not so much limited. Semantics, but still, words are powerful, so just something to think about. Access, moving on, you may have heard of this. This is the test that is mandated by No Child Left Behind. All ELLs in our country need to be assessed every year to see what their growth is in their language proficiency. In other words, are we teaching them more English every year? We need to be accountable for that. The test that we use in Wisconsin is called the Access, and it was created by this consortium called WIDA. And actually, WIDA was created at UW-Madison, and now WIDA, I believe, has 24 states in its consortium. Wisconsin is a leader in the field of ESL education, so it's very exciting. We'll talk more about the Access later. The last term that I'd like for you to learn is SIOP, or SIOP, but we generally call it SIOP. It's another acronym, alphabet soup, and it stands for Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. This is a set of strategies that are good for English language learners and actually for all students, and that's why our course is called ELL for All, because what's good for language learners actually, surprise, surprise, is good for all students. We'll definitely get into that at the end of our learning together, and I'll give you some resources to dig into that on your own. Okay, let's move on. One more background building activity to get you thinking before I dig into delving some content out for you. Something called an anticipatory set, and you may have seen this and you may have done this with your students. It's very powerful and it can be used in any content area. What you can do is give a set of statements to students and have them take some time to reflect and decide if it's true or false. And then they can also write or think about maybe why or why not they think it's true or false. Then you have them come back and discuss them. And then what you're doing really is pre-teaching them some key concepts before you get into the content. So we're going to model that for you here. On this slide, you're going to see 5 statements. And what I'd like for you to do is take a couple minutes, read them, and consider if you believe each is true or false. When we come back, we're going to dig into them a little bit more.